CPOV. CertainPOV.com.
Before we get started, I just want to give a special thank you and shout out to our podcast network, Certain POV. You can find us and all their other awesome shows at certainpov.com. That's CERTAINPOV.com.
Are you tired of watching your beloved characters being tortured by careless authors?
Are you sick of feeling like they could have swapped out all of the painful action and the plot would remain untouched? Subscribe to Books That Burn, the fortnightly book review podcast focusing on fictional depictions of trauma.
We assume that the characters' reactions are reasonable and focus on how badly or well they were served by their authors.
Join us for our minor character spotlights, main character discussions, and favorite non-traumatic things in the dark books we love.
Find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, and welcome to How the Fuck, the talk show turned podcast where we chat with folks who know what the fuck they're doing and ask them how the fuck they got there. I'm your host, Katie DeMatteis.
I'm also your host, Ben Martin Mooney.
And I'm your third-least host, Zeki Alethea.
Today, we are joined once again by Jules Bruff and her partner, Alethea Root. Alethea is an award-winning director and producer known for her socially impactful storytelling and dedication to elevating the human condition. Her work includes the feature film Part-Time Fabulous, which earned multiple festival awards, and the Emmy-winning short film A Love Story. With background in production design on sets like West Bank Story and Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along blog, which is a personal favorite of mine, Root brings a dynamic and visionary approach to filmmaking. So today, Jules and Alethea are here to discuss their latest film, Good Side of Bad. Welcome to you both.
Oh, thank you for having us, everyone. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back
here. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So, Jules, we already know your how the fuck. Yeah. And if folks want to learn more about that, they can recheck episode 10 that we put out just a little while ago, a few months at this point. But Alethea, how the fuck?
Well, it all started when I was born. No,
oh my God. I want to hear all the childhood trauma.
All right,
another one of these. Yes.
But actually in 10th grade, a student directed a play and I was like, I could do better. And so junior year, I directed a play and I was like, never auditioning again. This is brutal. I don't want to act anymore. I just want to direct and be in charge. So that happened. Then I directed a bunch of theater and then I went to college. And then I dropped out of my grad school college where I was going to become a teacher because I got a job offer in LA to work for a producer in development, and he had a bunch of stuff going on, and that was all very exciting. And then I got stuck in development hell, if you can imagine. And then I started doing production design, and I did the Dr. Horrible Sing-Along blog and West Bank Story, and I met a bunch of kids from USC, and that kind of became my grad school, working with those grad students. And then I kept saying, like, I'm a production designer, but what I really want to do is direct. Because that's what I moved to LA to do, is direct movies. I wanted to have a bigger reach than theater. And I knew movies, they last forever. They reach more people. It just has a longevity in the world that I really wanted. And so one day I was like, fine, today I'm going to stop saying that. I'm a director. And so I happened to go to a party that very evening with some friends of my husband. And I saw Jules. And she said, oh, what are you up to? What are you doing? And I said, oh, you know what? I'm a director. And then I guess later in the party, which she was telling someone else, I put my hand on her back and I was like, you know what? I'd really like to work with you sometime. And so then a couple of weeks later, or maybe a month later, she had an idea for a film and remembered this moment of, oh, Alethea is a director, and called me, and the rest is history.
That's right.
Yeah, I had directed a couple of short films before the feature we did together, but that was my first feature film as a director.
That's awesome.
It's a really cool way to have that happen. Just very
manifested
serendipitous.
It was pretty awesome. And actually, the production designer who was originally hired for West Bank Story, who didn't get the job, he was the person who told me not to tell people I want to be a director, that would be bad and I wouldn't get hired. And so not only did I production design that short film, which won an Oscar, then I also went on to become a director, and it didn't affect me getting hired.
Surprise.
Yeah, surprise. So yeah, it was pretty wonderful that Jules asked me to do that film.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in that night when she like touched my shoulder or my back or whatever it was, I'd like to work with you sometime. Like, I think she put like a spell on me, because when the idea came to me, literally, she popped into my head. I saw a vision of the whole thing. And then I called her and she was like, yeah, I'll come over. And then like she said, the rest is history. It's very strange.
And also in your thing, how the fuck do you do that? So I had resisted being a writer, because in movies, if you're a director, you mostly write your own stuff and often you produce your own stuff. And I had really resisted that. I came from plays. There's a million beautiful plays out there to direct. So I'm like, I'll just find someone else's script. And actually, no, the way that this happened was Jules and I wrote it together. And that's how it gets done. It's really hard to do someone else's stuff. I mean, hopefully one day I'll do someone else's stuff. You know, I have other scripts that I didn't write that I love, but that thing in filmmaking is you have to write it, you have to produce it, you have to direct it. That's how you do it, at least in the beginning. So thanks, Jules Bruff.
You're welcome, Alethea Root Dufresne.
Was that too long?
No, it's perfect and just so wholesome.
It made me giggle and I lost where we were in the question.
It's okay. Zeki's really good at editing.
Okay, great. I was just going to say that I had a similar reservation about writing, or maybe it was just like, I've not done it. I don't know how to do it. You know, I have an acting degree. So that was a wonderful first experience. And then on our second one that we'll be talking about during the show, I optioned a novel, and then we got to adapt a novel, which is like even like not harder, but just that's another whole thing. So yeah, we've been forced into being writers, and it's turned out okay. We even won a best screenplay thing.
We love awards.
Yeah, we got a lot of awards between the two of us.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
So to sort of dive into this evening's topic, would love if you guys could give us a sort of a quick rundown on the good side of bad. Like how did you guys sort of come into the idea? What, why is it meaningful to you? Any other things about it that sort of like are little nuggets of information or wisdom or, joy in your process that you'd like to share?
For sure. I'll start, and then Alethea, I'll hand the baton. And that's sort of how we work together too. It's like one person like does a ton of stuff, and then they're like, I need help. And then the other person comes and grabs the baton and like does so much stuff. And then we just like relay it. Anyway, so I'd been like trying to figure out what to do next for quite some time. And then my side hustle for many years was doing social media marketing for small businesses and individuals. And I was doing it for this author. Her name is Beverly Olivan. And so I decided to read one of her novels so I could understand her voice. And I just fell madly in love with the book. It's the book is called The Good Side of Bad, and we just took off the for the movie. But so the book is about 3 adult siblings, the youngest of which has a schizophrenic break in the book. And the 3 adult siblings, all of them are kind of like it's very postmodern to me. Like none of them are married. None of them have kids. They're all kind of a little bit of a disaster. They're all adults. They're trying to figure it out, but nobody's killing it. And they have to come together to help their sister, basically. And the parental units are really nowhere to, I mean, the mom's in the movie, but not a huge presence. And the way the book is written, it's like each character would have a chapter. It'd be like Peter, Sarah, Florence, Peter, Sarah, Florence, kind of like that. And it was just beautiful. And I come from a family that does have some mental illness. And there is someone in my family who has schizophrenia, and it's a pretty close relative. And it just hit me really hard. I guess what the word is, the gravity of the necessity of people coming together to help each other. because, if somebody's in the hospital, a friend or family member, and they have cancer, people are showing up, people are bringing casseroles, people are like helping.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this like vast hole with mental illness. There's this big space that people are too afraid, for a million different reasons, I guess, to fill. And I experienced it in my family, and I've seen it in other families. And so I just felt like, wow, this is another one I want to tell. And because these characters are forced to help each other, and no spoilers, but it doesn't have like a horrible ending or anything, so that's good. That's sort of what inspired me to move ahead with it. And then I was just literally calling Alethea to be like, yo, I just got the rights to this. And it's pretty easy to get the rights because I was working for the lady, and she had been in the entertainment industry as well. And she was like, are you asking me to? And I was like, oh, no, I hadn't thought about it. And I was like, do you want it? And she's like, yeah. And we're like, okay. And so then we started our journey, back in the saddle, and I'll take it from here, Alethea.
Yeah, back in the saddle. That's so funny because obviously I don't know what was happening on your end of that call when you called me. That I planted the seed is an interesting thing.
Because I had no idea I was not being asked in that moment.
It was my casting the spell again, apparently.
I mean, I'm not going to say that didn't happen.
Yeah, you have your truth. I read the book immediately. Your truth, that's the truth, not your truth. That's not what I meant.
I'm glad you felt that way.
No, I'm glad it all worked out. I love the book. I love the chapters. I think I had just seen Mudbound, which I thought was like one of the most profound movies ever made. I was like, oh, great, I'm going to make another Mudbound, and this time around mental illness. And for me, the subject matter is super important. I grew up in a community where we took care of, in our home, people with special needs and people with mental illness. And I found out much later this one guy apparently had schizophrenia, and I was the only person he would talk to. And my mom would be like, and I was just a kid, so I didn't know. I was just like, this was our life, So it's always been something dear to me. And then realized through the making of this movie that another relative in my family has schizophrenia. They referred to it as mental breaks, or he had to go to the hospital for a while. Like, no one ever used these words, but then while making the movie, started to like name things and use the words, and they were very helpful to me in making the movie. And then the great part about filmmaking is that people can see these stories and see like what's possible, what's not possible. And one of my girlfriends, her brother has schizophrenia, and she's like, I didn't know that people could live healthy or get past the trauma that she's in with her brother until she read the book and until I started sharing what we were doing. And so like that possibility that happens in the movie then can happen in real life too, if you know about it. And she started like researching different things than she had been researching before, simply by being my friend and talking to me about this movie while making it. So that's the thing that draws me to this book and to this film, and what keeps me going.
Amazing. And to that point, my first question is around the fact that while we are living in a time where invisible illnesses are more talked about and beginning to be more understood, I think that there is still a big education gap and a lot of misunderstanding, and there still is a lot of stigma. So I'm curious how you see the role of storytelling, like bridging those gaps where policy or clinical approaches are maybe not quite hitting the mark.
Yeah, this is something Jules and I talk about a lot, especially in the writing. It's like, we want to be honest. We want to be as honest as humanly possible. And we want to be as respectful as humanly possible. Someone read either the first draft, I can't remember, Jules, but they said, oh, it's schizophrenic light. And so we took some liberties and took some experiences from our real life experiences with people we know and added those in order to be as honest as possible, and to respect the illness. And one of the things, and Jules can chime in on this one, we didn't show the visions or the hallucinations that the character who has schizophrenia had, because neither Jules or I know what that looks like. And we didn't want to make it up, and we didn't want to
Sensationalize it.
sensationalize it. That's right. Or
Yeah.
yeah, or like create this other world. We wanted to stay in the world of reality as much as possible. And several people who have seen the film, really appreciate, several people with mental illness really appreciated how we did that.
So to piggyback on what Alethea said, is we have this amazing relationship now with the biggest schizophrenia Instagram influencer. She has like over 145,000 followers, and we were so lucky to get to meet her when we were screening at the Festival of Cinema in New York City, because she lives there. And we were both nervous about her reaction to the movie. We're like, is she going to think this is lame? Is she going to think this is just, bastardizing the condition, the diagnosis? Is it going to, we had no idea. And she came out and she said, thank you so much. This is like the first movie I've ever seen where I'm not depicted as a killer, as a crazy person, as someone to be afraid of.
Yeah, Michelle came, and that was a wonderful experience to get to hear her point of view about our film, especially since she is living with schizophrenia. And we weren't able to, in the making of it, talk to many people who have schizophrenia because
it was during the pandemic.
It was during the pandemic, but also like the people in my life are not the people who in my life that I had access to were not admitting that they had schizophrenia and did not want to talk to me about it. And their family members were protective of them. So I talked to multiple sisters and brothers with people with schizophrenia. And that's where I got a lot of my research. And then I also read the book, The Center Cannot Hold, by a woman who's a teacher at USC, and she has schizophrenia. And it was wonderful to read her book and get her insight. And then now getting to talk to Michelle afterwards, after the
Michelle Hammer, her whole thing is, I'm not violent. Like all of her like swag and everything is like, I'm not a violent person because I have this diagnosis. And I feel like that's one of the things that she really related to in how we interpreted the novel.
Yeah, and she's a great thing. Just to plug her one more time, because I watched a lot of it during the writing and during the filming, and then in the editing, where like people will ask her a question. She's like, "All right, let's talk about it." That's her thing. Let's talk about it. Do I see people when I'm talking to them? And she'd be like, "Yeah," and just share what she's experiencing. And so that's really cool. Like you can just DM her a question and then she'll answer it. And so I just watched a lot of those videos, which was nice to have that access to someone who was not afraid to talk.
Yeah, very open.
I believe that author you were looking for was Ellen Sachs.
Oh my God,
yes.
Thank you. I knew her name. The Center Cannot Hold by Ellen Sachs was given to me by my cousin, and it sat on my bedside. It was a big book. It sat next to my bed for a really long time. And then I was like, all right, you know what? Literacy is the path to like achievement in the world, and I'm going to read this book, and that's going to help me. I was having a little bit of a block during the edit, and so I read that, and it just really like carved a path in my brain to create the film in the edit.
That is really cool. To build off of that, because I think both of you have individually talked about different aspects about this next question. But kind of building on that idea with destigmatizing these types of things and talking about the human condition through storytelling, how would you say that Good Side of Bad contributes to the cultural conversation around these personal struggles, and what unique narratives does it challenge or enrich? And I think just like building on that whole idea of this thing is not something that is a dangerous idea or a dangerous illness or something like that. I feel like we started to talk about that, and I kind of wonder what else you both kind of dug through to create this unique narrative in the film.
I feel like something that I remember what I was going to say before is the narrative of the story isn't 100% squeaky clean about the mental health machine, the mental health medical machine. And it's a tricky thing to share a story with, we want to share it with the populations who are being serviced by a lot of these places. But it's not squeaky clean, as I said. So we are looking for all the avenues we can find to share this story, which it's not like condemning mental health providers at all, but it's also not making it look like sunshine and rainbows all the time. And so we have found a little bit of pushback from some of those different organizations. And I think that is so human, right? That's the human condition. Be like, no, we're doing the best that we can do and we're killing it. And it's like, yes, you're doing a great job. And also there's always room for improvement. And with this film, I dearly hope that we get on college campuses and we get to these bigger organizations that really do service people who either don't have the resources or don't have a network, whatever the case may be. They do such good work. Simultaneously, I think this kind of movie where they might be their population might be able to see themselves reflected in a way that's not like so negative, but just like real, will add to, the whole thing in Hollywood right now is representation. It's representation, and it's still so taboo. That vast hole I was talking about early on is like, we're still scared to name it, share about it. And it's interesting. And then the other side, the medical profession is a little bit like, well, hey, now, we're doing the best we can. So it's a tricky, slippery slope that we're on, and we're doing our best to use this film and our first film, Part-Time Fabulous, to continue the cultural conversation and hopefully little by little peel one layer and then another layer off and allow it to just be something that's talked about more and there's less shame around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Jules.
Thanks.
Also in the script, I mean, the nice thing about, theater or art is like you see yourself in it, you see yourself reflected back in that representation. And one of the things that we did which we added to the script that wasn't originally in the book was the character that Jules plays, Sarah. She loses her job, and her, I don't know, was that in the book? I don't think so.
No. Well, oh my God.
Now it's hard to like separate. I'm almost certain it wasn't. If it was, I am sorry. But it was really important for us to include that, because like how a mental illness affects the person who then has that, and also how it affects the family, and all the strings that are pulled in multiple places. And so that was really important to show that in the movie. And that was nice. And people have been like, it's nice to see how it affects the family, because we don't always get to see that. It is really about how a family comes together. So we get to see how each person, even though we didn't do the narration as one chapter per character, you still get to see it from all their perspectives within the film.
And that ties back into what this story could possibly do in the cultural conversation, which is, it affects parents, it affects siblings. And, I think it's so hard sometimes to be living with that kind of diagnosis and to be a family member with someone with that diagnosis that, it could be easy to run away, or, our story is, let's try to stick together, and through sticking together, good can come. And like Alethea said early on, like you can live a lot of people with a schizophrenia diagnosis or other, very severe mental health diagnosis can live a relatively, I don't know, the word normal is dumb, but, relatively like actualized life.
I think that sort of segues into our next question, which is about the fact that so much of really a lot of aspects of human struggle can be sort of boiled down to a label or a diagnosis. And I think you guys are doing a really excellent and sort of necessary reframing of things by involving more than just what is the impact on the individual, because there is, if you have a support network, or even if you don't have a support network, but there are still people that are working with you, there is an impact to that. And I'm kind of curious if there are other things that you were really intentional about making decisions around to reframe the experiences that people are going through, whether, as the individual or as sort of the larger network, to sort of help keep them human and multidimensional, as opposed to just sort of like, well, this person is the patient, and this person is the supporter, and this is the it's sort of boring.
Yeah, one quick thought on that is that the character of Peter, who's the brother, played wonderfully by Alex Quijano, is he's so multidimensional, he's so human because he doesn't want to deal with it. He he's like, this is a lot. This is my little sister. She's a pain. I don't want to deal with this. This is dumb. Wow, I want to live my life. So for sure, it's we definitely show that side of family relations, and again, the movie doesn't end up horribly. So there's growth. Every character. I hope that we did a good job of taking from the book and showing that all the characters have their own arcs. But yeah, I think showing the family dynamic is so real because it's real. It's like, Alethea, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, the reframing, getting back to like what's truthful and what's honest. We did a lot of conversation back and forth about the relationship with the psychiatrist and Lexi. Florence, played beautifully by Lexi Simonson. And there's, I had like this one idea, and Jules is like, no, you get 5 seconds with your psychiatrist. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's put that in the movie. And so many people who are like, oh my God, that was so great. That was such like a perfect little nugget of a moment when the psychiatrist is like reading from her her clipboard and like barely even sees the patient. And there was this psychologist who saw the film. We had actually a private screening for him, Dr. Talwal, and he saw it and he was like, I love how you didn't shy away from the truth of what really happens, and you're not denigrating psychology. He's like, and I'm a psychologist, I love your film, but you're showing like this is a problem that you don't get more than 15 seconds, and this is real. And just like, it's just one tiny little scene, but like we can have a conversation about that, and maybe mental health professionals can see it and be like, oh, that's what it looks like when I give 15 seconds of my time, So that kind of like just little, little scenes like that Jules was like, no, this is the truth of this. And I'm like, all right, let's put that in there.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me. And I think, again, we're doing a really good job of sort of you guys answering in a way that piggybacks super well into the next question, because I wanted to talk about the fact that taking a book and turning it into a film, there are always things that work on the page that don't work on the screen and vice versa. And I'm wondering, the first part is, are there any specific challenges and choices that you faced when you were figuring out how to take this story from one medium to another? Were there any scenes that you absolutely knew you had to see on the screen? And then also, was there anything you knew you had to change, like adding in the scene with the psychiatrist, or anything that you were just like, this isn't going to translate well? As good as it is to read, I think that we need to shift the narrative in some way.
I think we've touched on it a couple of times. Like Alethea early in the beginning of our interview was like, oh, I fell in love with Mudbound. And that movie is 3 separate narratives that are gorgeously interwoven into one another. And it's bananas. Like there's 3 different protagonists and everything, and it just works. And Beverly Oliven's novel, The Good Side of Bad, is also like that, because you see Peter's life, you see Sarah's life, you see Florence's life in their individual chapters. And then somehow the way she wrote it, it weaves together beautifully, kind of like Mudbound. And when we were adapting it, it was a real head scratcher. We're like, how do we do that? So it is the youngest sister, the character of Florence, played by Lexi Simonson, it's her story. And then we're like, wait a minute, is it her story or is it Sarah's story? Because Sarah's the one who drops her life to try to help her sister. And then, we went back and forth and back and forth. To me, that was the biggest challenge, besides deciding whether or not to show her hallucinations and hear her hearing voices. But we ultimately decided to go with one protagonist because in film, that generally is what is done. And even though we're renegades and think we're super punk rock, we thought it would be more powerful to show it from her perspective, the woman who's dealing with this situation, super hardcore situation. So, um, Sarah, my character, it's also very much her story and it's also Peter's story. But that was the biggest change from the book, in my opinion, in terms of adapting it and then the way Alethea directed it.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because even in the edit, we had several versions, right? You go through many edits, and there was an edit. Jules never saw this one, but where Peter was really like the focus, and I was in the edit, like on Peter's journey, and that was interesting. Yeah, and then finding whose story from the book to the screen, instead of it being the equal parts, which Jules said, then every scene in the movie is focused, laser focused to what is going on with Florence. And so everything always relates back to her. And that was a real choice. Actually, a film is written and then it's filmed and then it's edited. So it's like 3 different versions of the story. So really in the edit is when we hone that in. And obviously in a book, there's lots and lots and lots of words. And in a movie, you want to show it, don't tell it. So it was interesting. I went back through the book. We were doing an interview with Beverly, and I was trying to find a chapter in the book that would like relate perfectly to the movie. Like she could read the chapter and then we could show the scene. And it was virtually impossible because this like weaving thing happened from like, we unwove her book and then wove it into a movie where like one sentence in the book turned into like a giant scene in the movie versus like 20 pages was still down to one conversation. And that was an interesting thing to go back after and look at the edit and then look back at the book, because, the book is really long, obviously longer. And so then you have to distill it. But that was the biggest challenge, to take all this very wordy, they all talked a lot. And in the script, we had these long scenes. And then in the edit, then we just like took out as much as humanly possible and just left like the most important nugget from that conversation. So, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. I was just going to jump in and say, like, that's sort of some of the magic I find in filmmaking. And I think it probably is with big budget projects as well, but for sure an indie, it's like, I think it's everything. It's this crazy, amazing discovery through each different step. Like, yeah, the writing of it, and then the shooting of it, and then the editing of it. It becomes its own piece of art in each different step. It's cool.
Well, in keeping with what Katie said about each answer sort of segueing beautifully into the next question, I was going to ask, and you touched on a little bit there, how much you guys actually worked with Beverly on the film and sort of translating things from the book to the screen, and if there were things that she maybe was like absolutely not, or if you guys had to navigate any challenges at any point.
So it was interesting because it was really important to me that she liked the movie.
Reasonable.
And it was really important to Jules, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we had autonomy, that Jules and I could make the movie that we knew we needed to make without needing her approval.
Yes.
And so the first draft, she read. We had like a dinner at her house with Sierra Danielle, who helped us write the first draft. And she loved it. And she was like, this is great. And then Jules and I went in and tinkered for a long time and changed some stuff. And sometimes I would be afraid, like Beverly's not going to like it. But she didn't request to have input on that level, and we didn't offer for her to have input on that level. And then we sent her the screener before we premiered, right?
Yeah.
So she wasn't seeing it fresh. So she saw it before it premiered so she could be prepared. And she just complimented it up and down. And that was like, to me, like, I could take this big breath as a director, because I felt so responsible to get her book right, as someone who loves to read books and then loves to see the movies. And like, I'm like, there's a million books you loved and you didn't love the movie, right? And I wanted to be the director who you read the book, you love the book, and you love the movie. So I felt very honored and privileged that she loved the movie as much as I loved her book.
That's very cool. Sounds like it went well, given that you're talking about it smiling and not,
Sobbing hysterically.
Yeah. Yeah, it was so sweet when we had our world premiere at the Dances with Films film festival. It was like opening night. It was such an exciting and like the energy was buzzing, and she stood up during the Q&A and she was so honored and humbled herself and so proud of us. It was like, talk about wholesome. It was amazing.
That's really cool.
That is really cool. And I know we had brought up Mudbound, the film, and books like The Center Cannot Hold as some not necessarily direct inspirations for wanting to work on this project, but definitely within the realm of bringing this conversation to the table again in terms of mental health. You mentioned there aren't many great portrayals of schizophrenia or other mental health conditions for that matter in media, but what outliers did you find or look to in terms of inspiration when putting this work together?
Can I jump in on first and then you go? Well, I would say there's a lot of excellent films and some TV series that do address mental illness. That said, a lot of them show the extremes of it, whereas I think while we don't portray schizophrenia quote unquote light, we show the reality of it, but sort of more of just not this extreme version of it, which is so many people have this condition and they don't run around, killing people. So were a lot of great things to look at, like, Silver Linings Playbook and some of the more sort of mainstream projects. We gleaned some stuff from that, but we actually, at least, I'll speak for myself, but we looked at You Can Count on Me, The Savages. We looked at a lot of like late 90s, early aughts family dramas because that's sort of the vibe we felt when we read the book, and the book is set in the Pacific Northwest. And anyway, those movies just sort of like just kept hitting me over the head. And I think Alethea, you can jump in, but you've had a similar feeling.
Yeah, with those family movies, absolutely. And I mean, I'm not the kind of director who watches a ton of movies in order to get inspiration from my movies. And I didn't do this for plays either. When I was directing, I get my inspiration from like talking to people about their experiences. So, for better or worse, that's kind of how I do in my brain, is more of a conversation and more of what's coming from like the ultimate goal of the movie, and less about like, we're going to make it like this movie, or we're not going to do it like that movie. But the family movie with the one you just mentioned,
The Savages.
What about the other one?
You can count.
You can count on me. So one of the nice things about You Can Count on Me, which I did look to for inspiration, but it was more about the economy of framing that they did, and You Can Count on Me. And I'm pretty sure it was a low budget, even though it had big people in it. But they did a lot of what I love, and maybe because I come from theater, but like a lot of wides and people walking in and out, and having the images, the action, like really speak for itself. Now, obviously, in filmmaking, a wide is actually much harder than a close up for a lot of people involved. The lighting and the movement and the camera and all of that. So it's not necessarily the better way to film on a low budget. But that was an inspiration on like, how do I get everything in with economy of shots? But as far as like other schizophrenic stories, I didn't do a lot of research into that, just because that's not my style. But we did watch the Wally Lamb show, which was really,
Yeah, the one with Mark Ruffalo where he plays twin brothers and one of them has schizophrenia and one doesn't. It's like, it's tremendous. It's an amazing limited series. I forget what it's called.
Wasn't called Wally Lamb.
No, I think isn't that the author?
Oh yeah, yeah. And in Ellen Sachs' book, The Center Cannot Hold, that one of the last chapters was like, I wish Hollywood would just make a movie that was honest and not sensational. So that was also like one of our guiding, for me, one of my guiding mantras while making it, and finally in the edit.
I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. Jules, you are playing one of the siblings, and we've talked about how important it was for each of these individual characters to feel very real and multidimensional. And I have to assume this role required a decent amount of emotional depth from you. What informed how you prepared to play this part? And were there any personal experiences, or, I mean, we kind of talked about research, but additional research that shaped that performance for you?
Well, it's a very interesting experience because the first movie we made, Part-Time Fabulous, is loosely inspired by my life. So I had like a treasure chest to pull from within me to, create all of who that character was, which is me, but a little different. For this one, it was already all on the page in the book. And then we moved the book into, the cinematic format of that story. And so since I was part of that, from moving it from the book to the screenplay, I felt like I absorbed Sarah, which is actually so fun for me because I feel like that's one of my strengths is I'm a natural actor. Like it's natural. My naturalism is my fallback. So to be steeped in that story, I think really helped. I mean, it's not that I didn't work on it at all, but it is like it was inside of me because I'd been living with it for 3 years. And in terms of, I mentioned early on, I have a family member who deals with this condition. And, I know the older sister in that dynamic. And I think I maybe brought her spirit with me type of thing. That sounds sort of woo woo, but I think that's what I did.
That makes sense. And I imagine that, I mean, I didn't realize that you'd been working on this for 3 years. So was it 3 years from getting the rights to the script to starting filming? Is that what that timeline looked
Yes.
like? And then how long were you filming for?
We filmed for about 5 weeks during the height of the pandemic. And then we did additional shooting because one of our family members got sick. And so we needed to take a whole year off from working on the film. So then we did additional shooting in 2022. We finished it beginning of 2023 and premiered May of 23 in the film festival circuit.
So this was what, like a 6-year process, 7-year process, start to finish?
Yes, ma'am.
How does it feel to be done?
Amazing.
So good. We're so ready.
We're so ready. Yeah, my son is 8 now, or almost 9, and we started when he was still napping during the day, like Jules and I.
Wow.
Right during nap time. So that's a long time coming.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, it's a long process. You start the film festival and then a year later your film comes out. It's like nothing's happening, but so much is happening.
Yeah. Like we actually haven't stopped working on it. So I think that's one of the reasons we're so ready is we're like, are we going to be able to stop working on it? Is that possible?
Is it over yet?
Can I stop doing 18 people's jobs?
Is that the light at the end of the tunnel, or is it the one you don't want to walk towards?
Yeah, I know.
That's how the bleep 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 is doing everybody's job and not giving up and not stopping and still doing it. And no matter how big that hill is and how heavy the rock is that you're pushing up, to keep pushing it up. Otherwise it could have, we could have abandoned ship so many times. I like to think about our relationship as filmmaking partners as
like Thelma and Louise. Like in the beginning, Thelma was just like killing it and having the time of her life, and Louise was like just this little like little lady doing her thing. And then they had that big like plot thing happen, and they completely changed places, and one just wanted to give up and the other one's like, we're not giving up. And Alethea and I have vacillated between those two like maybe 8 times in the last 7 years.
I swear they're reading our
I
questions.
know. I
ahead.
was just
Really?
gonna say it is insane the way with which you guys pivot into the next question every single time. I was gonna say, so this is not your first collaboration, and you know, over the course of, I would say just this project, but maybe you know, it's something that you guys want to even like go further back in the way that you guys have worked together over time. Like, are there, you know, like are there ways in which you guys have seen unique dynamics evolve? Whether it's, you know, oscillating between like which one of you is the cheerleader, and which one of you is like, please put me on your back and carry me. It's going to be a couple of days where I'm going to really need that help. Have you seen that maybe happen more significantly over the last 7 years working on this, or are there other things that have kind of come up where you guys are like, oh, that's new for us?
I feel like they say your sophomore feature film is the hardest, and that has been my experience, and I think Alethea would agree. Like our first one, it was like micro budget, which you'd think would be harder, but somehow that was like magical fairy dust, like was dusted over that whole film, and doors just flew open. Now, doors have flown open for this film too. It has not. I mean, we've been very fortunate. You know, we've got like 8 awards under our belt. We have a great distribution company. You know, Alethea won 2 Best Director awards. Like it's been really amazing. Simultaneously, it's been really hard. So I think because we're both like very type A, we're very both alpha, when one of us is either too busy or exhausted or fed up because we're human, the other one won't give up and will keep going. And then when that has to shift again, the one who's in the place of like, no, we're moving forward, this is happening, we're just good at helping each other that way. And I don't think we had to deal with that so much with the first one, because this one has just been like, if you look at our cast and crew list, it's like, I don't know, 100 people or something. It's like literally insane. And we are in charge. We're like the movie studio, which we should have 18 employees helping us. What do you think, Alethea?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about Part-Time Fabulous was such a, it was a micro, and we, that was a very quick turnaround. Jules had the idea in August, and we were done filming in November before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty tight turnaround, as opposed to this one, which has gone on and on and on. But that's also the sophomore hump that, you know, it had to be better. It had to be more polished. It wasn't flying. We weren't like learning as we were going. We were doing as we were going. And of course we were learning, but there was no excuses. Like it had to meet the next level of professionalism.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard. And then it also, like, one of the things that Jules is so great at is she's shipping. Like a producer ships the product. They're not producing unless you finish the product, right? Unless you can ship it. So like our jobs, we have shipped it. Now we just have to get it out into the world. So everybody listening to this podcast, it's time to watch the film and see for yourself and let us know what you think, because we're looking forward to hearing from our audience.
Yes.
All right, that was like a total pitch. I don't know why that went. I don't know.
No, I'm leaving it all in. That's perfect.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, you were just talking about learning these things in doing the next project together and everything like that, and getting through that hump of doing all that work. But, you know, with these types of collaborations and repeat collaborations, in fact, they can oftentimes like reveal some things. What's one thing that you maybe learned about yourself or your co-creator during the project?
I've learned that when I get stressed, I like to yell a lot. And that's not good. And nobody likes it when you yell. And what I knew actually going in is that, like, I am very like, I'm watching the clock. And like, I know how much time I have for something. And if someone tells me like, we got to move along, and I'm like, do I, or do I have 5 more minutes to get this? And I realized like, sometimes I feel like you have to ask for permission from people. Like, no, let's go one more time. And I realized I shouldn't ever have to ask permission as a director. I should just say, hey, we're going one more time. And not to make an excuse for more time or to ask for what you need as a director, but just to like take it with authority. And I think that's like a lesson that I was the AD on our first film, and I had every single shot. I knew literally, like, we had 4 days to shoot it. We had 12 days to shoot it. And I knew we were 12 hours every single day. No one was telling me like, we got to move on, we got to do this, because I knew exactly what I needed. And I realized how important that is for me to like, not the control to be controlling, but to control so I don't feel out of control. Does that make sense? And I had to learn that lesson over and over again on this film in every aspect. And that was a bummer. But I'm grateful for those lessons, and I hopefully will do better next time.
Well, I would say I learned about myself that I'm more stubborn than I even thought I was. And I don't take no for an answer. And the fact that I'm a good producer means that I am controlling in a certain way. And that is something I'm really working on, because while my like drive and vision and focus is great, it also can be overwhelming to my team, especially like everyone else around me has no idea. But then my like teammate is like, Jesus Christ, like back down a little bit, you know? So I just really have to temper my ferocity. I look so wholesome, huh? And then what I learned about Alethea is that even if we're not seeing eye to eye about how to do something, because we're two different brains. It's like a marriage. Like some of it's going to work sometimes, some of it's not, because you're two different people. But we have the same exact goal. When that was a beautiful thing to realize, like, no, we both want this to be the best possible story and movie that it can be, period, full stop. It's not about her ego. It's not about my ego. It's not about me having my name first in the credits. It's not about her, you know, running around being like, I'm the boss. Like, it's like, no, we both want all of this to work as beautifully as possible. And I think that was my biggest lesson through this, is to have to trust my partner.
It's a good lesson.
Hey everybody, Zeki here. Just a quick break in between what you have just listened to and what you're about to listen to. I just want to throw it out there. We had a slight break in between recording the first part of this interview and the second part of this interview due to some scheduling issues, and we wanted to make sure that we got this out just in time for the Good Side of Bad's release, which, if you're listening to this on the day or two after this episode drops, make sure you go out and find the Good Side of Bad. It just got released on digital, and we would really appreciate you, watching the movie and giving it your own thoughts after listening to this. But in the meantime, just as a warning, Ben, our co-host on How the Fuck, got a little bit ill due to just changes in weather and some traveling that had been taking place during the holidays of 2024. You will notice his voice is a little bit different, and he pulls through like a champion to make sure we got all of our interview questions recorded, but you may hear a slight difference in his voice, and that is the reason. So keep plugging along to the episode, enjoy it, and thanks.
Looking back on your creative journeys, was there a pivotal moment that shaped who you are today, the type of art that you create, whether it was an experience, a choice, a failure? Is there one moment or even a couple of moments that you look back on and see as being those sort of pivotal pieces of your story?
I love this question. Jules, do you want to go first or should I go?
You can go for it.
All right. Well, I started in theater, and I went to a play called One with my mother, and I just thought it was so brilliant. It was about a South African school teacher, and they were in a South African school. And from a young age, I was obsessed with Africa and South Africa. And I love this play so much that I wanted to bring it to more people, because theater, it's very limited how many people can get to that theater that weekend or whatever. And so with the help of my mom, I guess, I brought it to my school. So I produced it essentially, quote unquote, but I brought it to my school and was able to share it with them. And just the idea of being able to have an idea and then execute it, especially when it came to like a subject I really loved. So that was like the start of me wanting to direct and produce. And then I directed my first play and felt like I wanted it to last longer in the world. And so then I decided to be a filmmaker because, it lasts forever, or as long as media will be alive, people can watch it. And people are still watching our first film that we did together. And fortunately, our first film that we did together, Part-Time Fabulous, also was part of my, I don't know, my life mission, or that sounds so cheesy, to bring meaningful stories to light and expose truths and allow people to see themselves in other people. So that's always been my mission with all the work that I've done. So that was a pivotal moment for me back in high school.
That's awesome. I don't think I knew that you brought a play that you'd seen to your school. That's super cool. I would have started a little later if I had answered first, but now that I heard your story, I think the overarching drive behind my art, if you will, started when I was super young too. My mom took me to see a play at ACT, the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. And like so many of us, my household was not perfect. And when I saw, how I was raised, and it was great in a lot of ways. But when I saw this play, I felt like not alone somehow. And I can't even tell you what the play is. I know it's a professionally done play, and it was, I could probably spend 3 days figuring it out. But I don't think I'll ever do that, guys. Anyway, the thing is though, I was like, oh, I don't feel so alone in the world. And from that moment on, because I always knew I wanted to act, even before then, I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. I want to make people not feel so alone in the world and help people remember that we're in this together. And then when I was in high school, I was doing a play, and my two favorite teachers, who happened to both be gay, which is amazing at this Catholic school I was at, but they pulled me aside and they were like, you're really good at this, and keep doing this. And it just sort of really solidified. I mean, I knew it was going to do, but it solidified it, that my mission of wanting to make people feel not so alone, and that I'd moved these people, meant a lot to me. And, Hollywood is fraught with things that aren't really those kind of stories, but simultaneously, in the midst of having to pay the bills and do commercials and things like that, I've gotten to do a lot of great stuff. And, the work that Alethea and I've done was accidental. I didn't anticipate being a mental health advocate, but it through film, and it just sort of I don't know, the universe was like, whoosh, and it all fell together. And so we ended up doing that. So somehow, from when I was a really little girl, that mission has carried through to today, but in a very subliminal, way. It's not like every day I'm like, I'm going to make everyone not feel alone today. I don't, but maybe I should. Maybe I'd do more. But anyway, it's very rambling.
No, I think something that's really wonderful about what both of you answered is that your rationale for why you are in the career that you're in is so unselfish. And I think that a lot of people not a lot of people, there are plenty of people who go into the arts because they want to give back and they want to tell stories. But there are also a lot of people that go in being like, I want to be a star. Like, I want to be a Hollywood celebrity, see my name, blah, 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 blah. And both of you really are coming from such a selfless place about why you want to create the things that you want to create.
Well, I think that's true. And then there's the other side of that coin, which is I think sometimes people have a hard time understanding it. When I've said what I'm about to say, they're like, well, then, just go do theater in a small town or something. I'll be like, yeah, I'd love to win an Oscar, or yeah, I'd love to work with the top people in the field.
Yeah.
And that would make me famous. And they're like, well, why does that matter? I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. It's just that's sort of how it goes.
Yeah.
Like they go hand in hand. So I don't know, maybe I didn't explain it well to the people that I'm talking about who've over the years have been like, well, just go to theater if you want to make a difference. And I'm like, no, I want to do it here and I want to make a big difference and I want to work with the best people doing it.
And I think that the scale is important, right? Which isn't to say that you can't have an impact at a community theater, because you are certainly having an impact, but your goal here is to impact as many people as possible. And you're not going to do that, down the street at the Kingston Community Theater.
No, generally not. But yeah, what do you think about that, Alethea?
No, I agree. And I think the scale is part of it, because if you do win an Oscar, or when you win an Oscar and when you work with the top, then that is reaching more people.
Yeah.
Because of that. So your goal in the world is just exponentially growing with each step up the ladder. So even though the step up the ladder is like great personally, and of course, like there's a personal satisfaction of like making something beautiful that's lasting, and it can still also serve the community and the world at large.
It's also like, can you imagine telling a scientist like not to want to win a Nobel Prize? You know what I mean? Like, totally. Of course you want, like, of course that is a goal. Of course that is something to aspire to. To me, that's such a silly thing to say, but
I love that you said that, because the last thing I'll say about this, I remember when I lived in New York City, I was a hot mess at that time with depression and stuff, which is what our first movie's about, which is good, Part-Time Fabulous. Anyway, I was at this barbecue in Brooklyn. I was like trying to be confident in being an actor. I'm going to get all teary. But this woman was like at this barbecue. She's like, I was like, well, yeah, I'm an actor. And she was like, oh, well, we know why people are actors. It was so judgy. And I was like, oof. I didn't know what to say. I should have been like, well, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons. Now, these days, I'd be like, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why people are actors. And so your statement is like dumb.
Yeah.
But a lot of judgment of being an actor. And I know a lot of my fellow actors, I've gotten the vibe from them. People will be like, oh, what do you do? I'm an actor. Oh, what restaurant do you work at? Like, I mean, I think people are a little bit more conscious today than they were when I started, but still people can be so like, thoughtless and callous.
It's funny that reminded me, I'm not going to name this person because I certainly don't need to do that, but I was visiting the house of a very famous professional actor. And I remember him talking about how the people that are in LA that are waiting tables that want to be actors aren't actually actors. And I was like, that's such an awful thing to say, because just because they haven't been able to fully make a living doing this thing right this second doesn't mean that they're not actors, and doesn't mean that they're not trying and that they don't care about the craft. So I feel like that's a very kind of like parallel moment of someone from the other side having that same response.
Yeah.
Actually, that never sat well with me.
No, it's a weird thing to say. It's like if someone said to Van Gogh while he was alive, which they probably did, is maybe why he cut his fucking ear off.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, he never sold a painting until after he was dead.
Yeah. So like,
yeah,
it certainly is a seat of either privilege or ignorance to say something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So lack of recognition of the, whatever sort of confluence of fortuitous events allowed you to have either the connection that you needed, whether it's through friends, family, your own networking. Like, that's amazing that you have been able to get to a point where you are, a famous actor. But you weren't always a famous actor unless you're
Right. This
a
was
Nepo
also
baby.
an older person who had a very different experience with Hollywood when they started. So there was a lot of stuff there. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, and that's true. The business is like, went from the talkies to, from silent films to the talkies, and those kind of changes happen every few decades. And so it's a scramble for anyone starting to be like, okay, it used to be this way, it's this way now. How am I going to adapt and keep going? So yeah, I'm not that it was easy back when whomever this guy is, but it's still different.
Yeah, absolutely.
So taking a sort of a sidestep, but in a parallel stream of thought, we were talking about you guys being selfless, and there is a certain amount of selfishness that then comes with the like care for yourself when you are doing something like that. And the process of creating something that is very personal can be, obviously very rewarding, but also extremely draining throughout. And so I'm curious how you guys were able to stay grounded and take care of yourselves during, like particularly intense creative periods.
Do you want me to answer that, Alethea, first, or do you want to?
Sure, go for it.
Are you referring specifically to this project?
I would say that it could be much more open-ended if there's something that like particularly sticks out from a different project. That
Okay.
also valid.
I think my whole journey has been learning how to take care of myself. Alethea, you go.
Well, it's interesting. You use the word selfless and also selfish is in the same sentence. Being a film director is extremely selfish because of the amount of time and concentration and attention that a film needs. And just like you have to put aside, you kind of have to get into the zone, right? And you can become unhealthy because there's so much to accomplish, and you have to not push people away, but you have to be like, you have to carve out so much time and space in order to have the creative thoughts that in the act of making art, and I think all art probably, there's this tremendously selfish thing that you do in the making of it, but then the giving it away to the public, that's where I guess the word selfless could come in. But your question was more about how we take care of ourselves. So it is a struggle because like I would love to go on a walk every single morning, but I have a Zoom at 9 and I got to eat breakfast, get my kid to school, and then be prepared for my Zoom call. So I don't go on that walk. And that's just like a little tiny thing of not taking care of myself because I'm like, oh, I got to send this one more email. Oh, I got to send this one more email. Oh, I got to do this. Oh my God, that list is so huge constantly in order to bring something into the world. And then once you've brought it into the world, which is where we're at with Good Side of Bad, now we have to share it with the world. And that list is like a mile long. So I have been this year have been really good or about taking Saturdays. So Saturday is a family day, and I tried desperately not to look at my phone and just to concentrate on the family. And even that's hard. But for me, my self-care is putting down the phone and not responding to text messages immediately, as much as I can without failing other people or without jeopardizing the thing that we've worked so hard to create.
And I would piggyback on both of those things you said about the selfishness that is required to be an artist who really puts a lot into it. Yeah, I'm constantly working. I take Saturdays off too. That's new for me. My mom was like, "Oh my God, why do you not take a day a week off?" So I do now. But yeah, it is selfish because it's all about what I'm doing. But simultaneously, I take care of my family and I'm not like, looking at myself in the mirror all day or something. um, um, and then in terms of working on us just do this project, yeah, the constant learning better techniques for self-care around trying to get enough sleep, drink enough water, make sure I'm exercising. I'm in therapy, keep going to therapy. And I'm always reading books about being present and stuff like that and working on mindfulness. And I have like a morning routine I do that's like a lifesaver. It involves like meditation and journaling and stuff like that. And I started that at the end of 2020. And I tell you what, that has changed my life. Like actually having a routine that I don't like started January and then stop February 1st, which is so classic human, right? But I
Mm.
do that and it really helps ground me as I go through the day. And then the other thing I do is, I always used to hear people say like, "Oh, be intentional with your day." And I was like, "What does that even mean? Be intentional with your day?" And then I do this all the time. Alethea knows it. I'd be like, I intend for this meeting. I said it to myself for this interview. I said, I intend to help these people as much as possible tonight, and I intend to be helped by these people as much as possible tonight. I intend to help good side of bad as much as possible tonight. I intend to be helped by good side of bad as much as possible tonight. So it's not fully selfless at all because I also want to receive whatever it is would be good for me to receive. But that helps too. And I tell you, when I do that, the universe somehow, it sounds so kooky. I sound like Shirley MacLaine, but the universe does like sort of like swoop in and, not like I get everything I want and everything is perfect, but there's like the path seems to be a little bit more clear if I do live intentionally, in addition to trying to get enough sleep and drink enough water and exercise. Those things are rough for me to do
Hmm.
all the
Yeah.
time.
I hear you on that one.
I was gonna say very, very relatable.
I do wonder if the intention setting, whether it's if you want to take sort of the more woo woo approach of like you're sort of manifesting or whatever, or if it's just sort of by calling it your own attention to it when the moments where there is sort of like a junction that you could either pick up on a thing or not pick up on a thing because you've brought it to the front of your
yourself.
mind, you're more able to like pick up on that and then take advantage of that moment.
I 100% agree. And I take every single thing with a grain of salt. So I have no idea how anything works, but I do believe that focused energy does shift something. Like if I was like, I'm going to be over here on my phone and I'm thinking about other things I'm doing, that I wouldn't be able to be here. So I take a moment and set the intention.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think our meetings when we do set those intentions are much more fruitful than when we don't.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So it just helps keep you on track, right?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it's mindset. Everyone who's super successful always is doing those TED Talks or master classes, and mindset is always at the forefront of that.
Yeah.
So
It's that actively living perspective and
Hmm.
like observation of like the universe around you. You're kind of putting like the quantum mechanics aside of like the observable universe versus the unobservable.
No, Zeki, let's
Like,
dive into that right now. We got
well, like
3
that's like a
hours.
thing. Like the perceptions
No, I know,
that
I know.
are put out there affect the world at like the microscopic scale and at the macroscopic scale, and
Yeah.
and just like putting yourself in. It sounds like between both of you, putting yourself in that mindset to actively be not. I don't want to say chasing because that sounds like a little bit cheap, but like actively pursuing all of these things and like being mindful and being present. And I think that really changes the outcome of like everything because you're setting that starting point and you can only build off of that.
Mhm.
So now that we have taken some deep dives into our reflections, thinking back to your younger selves when you were first starting out, like what advice would it be? And it doesn't even need to be like necessarily like mental health related because we were just talking about how all of these things sort of like organize our thoughts and get us on the right step to start each day. But what other advice would you give to somebody or your younger self?
I would say take care of yourself first and foremost, and with the basics, which so many of us for some reason like it's like really hard to do. But eating really well, um, meal prepping, making sure drinking water, getting enough sleep, because I think that's the basis of everything, the foundation, if you will, right? Because, like, if you're sick or you're run down, you're not going to be performing optimally and you're not going to be thinking optimally. Like, you're not going to be able to make the best decisions. So that's number one. And then number two, I think, would be trust your gut. And I think that's huge in probably any field, but in entertainment in particular, like, just trust your gut. Like, if you something feels weird, then just move along. Simultaneously, don't burn any bridges. Try to remain kind and create distance if the person isn't healthy or the situation isn't healthy for you to be around. And then in terms of craft, I do believe as an actor and as a filmmaker, I'm like a late in life filmmaker. It was not my plan, but like study and don't stop studying and be around people who are excited about what you're doing and don't be around people who are like hating on the business or hating on life because it's hard enough if you even when you have a good attitude, you know, like life just throws stuff at you all the time, like all these curveballs, and you have to like adapt and adjust. So yeah, I mean, it's so cliche, but I 100% stand behind it. Try to stay away from negative people. And if you're related to them, you know, limit the time you spend with them. Really.
That was good, Jules. I agree with all of that. And also staying true to yourself. And I mean, it's interesting, like as an actor, you talked about like eating healthy and keeping your body, because your body is your temple and your body is your craft. And as a director, it's not the same, obviously. And someone gave me some great advice and about just being true to yourself, and then also like remembering that you're the first audience to your work. And so if something is ringing true for you, then it's going to ring true for your audience. And I think that also like goes into like what Jules was saying about trusting your gut and being committed to yourself. And so if you're true to yourself and if you're honest about what you're receiving when you're directing or acting or doing, and you're honest that it's either good or bad, then you can make adjustments and move on and improve. And if you're not being honest with yourself, then you can tell yourself a bunch of stories which probably won't serve you in the end. So that would be my advice. And then yep.
I'm curious because you're talking about how, you know, you're your first audience, and also you're trying to produce things that are authentic and that feel real and feel important. How do you handle the fact that not everything is going to resonate with everyone, and getting that negative feedback from the, you know, subsection of the population that wasn't going to like what you were doing to begin with?
Yeah. That's a big one, right? Because we're actually getting reviews right now for Good Side of Bad. They're starting to come in because it's starting to be public in the world, and it's very exciting. But Jules and I always say to each other, like, we made the best film we could make, and we put forth what we could do in the amount of time, with the research that we had, with who we are as human beings and artists, and we couldn't do anymore. We literally pushed ourselves to the limit of what we created, and we're proud of it. And if someone doesn't like it, that's on them, and it doesn't reflect poorly on me personally. And
that is healthy.
It's and I mean, like, reading the reviews is fun. And then, you know, there was one review, it said so many nice things, and then it was like, but it's not without its flaws. I'm like, yeah, duh, of course it's not without its flaws. Like, what do you want from me? And I think if at some point we had been like, oh, it's good enough, then I would feel bad about the reviews. Like, there's one project I made, and I wasn't true to myself, and I wasn't ready to ship it. And it wasn't done. It needed another pass or two more passes. And then if someone says something bad about it, then I feel bad because I know that I didn't do the job that I knew I could and should have done for that project. And that was a long time ago. and I haven't done that since. So I learned from that lesson that you just got to put it all out there. And also, someone gave me this advice or comment a long time ago, and they said a film is never finished, it's just abandoned. Is that a famous quote, Jules? Did you tell me that?
Oh no, I wouldn't have said that.
No,
But
but
I don't know if it's famous.
I think
It could be.
I think it's someone famous, like a film. Maybe it was Steven Spielberg. It was someone who like most people respect.
According to Google, it was David Fincher.
Oh, David Fincher. Thank you.
Oh,
Yes.
interesting.
But also it's attributed to George Lucas somewhere else. So unclear if we know for sure who said it.
Well, So David Fincher, one of our friends, works for him a lot, or did.
And I was in Zodiac.
And yeah, you were in Zodiac.
Mhm.
So I also like that. Like, it's never finished, it's just abandoned. And obviously we didn't abandon either of our films before we felt like they were ready for the world.
But I get the sentiment behind it is that you could tinker forever, and you could tinker for literally forever. You could tinker for 20 years on a film and then be like, this is it. And then you could put it out in the world and some people still not like it or still not get it. So the shipping, putting things out into the world is critical in terms of any kind of art, I think. But, we do put, as a team, we definitely put everything out there. Like, it's like blood, sweat, and tears. It's 11 p.m. texting. It's 6 a.m. texting. I mean, it's insanity. But, I think like the teams who are on, the teams that are in competition for whatever it is across the world, that's how they are. They work and focus really hard on whatever it is they're doing. And I think that together as a team, we spur each other on to really behave like that. But then I'm the one who like wants to ship it. And she's gotten much better at wanting to ship it rather than like tinkering.
I was going to say, I feel like the like notion of whole assing it and the way that you can then show up as a proud in this case like producer, writer, director, but that feels like it applies to many more things, like parenthood, yourself as a person. Like truly, if you feel like you've done your best, when the time comes for a movie to release, your child to leave the house, whatever it is, you can at least look at it, and say, I did my absolute best with the tools that I had available at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's something to be said for the way that that's sort of a ubiquitous piece of like the human experience. Yeah. I want to ask a much more lighthearted question. I feel like
I think we're out of the trenches now.
Yeah. Let's like, all right, let's like lighten things up here a little bit. Obviously, what's next for you guys is really still the publicizing of The Good Side of Bad. Has not officially released yet. But are there upcoming projects or things that you can talk about that you are excited about and are able to share?
I think I'll go. So publicizing Good Side of Bad, that's the next 3 weeks is hardcore doing that. And I'm working with my friend Clark Childers on his first feature, his directorial debut. I'm playing, it's an ensemble, and I'm in that and working as a producer on it. It's a feature. And then I'm making a micro budget feature that I will act and, I mean, it's crazy, and write and co-direct, and produce, and
holy moly!
Jesus Christ!
I know. And then some other friends, I produced their short. It's called Station Zero. It was really great. You could Google it. It's great. And they've turned the script into a feature. And so I have a role in that, and I'm helping them produce that. And then my friend Mildred Langford, she plays Nurse Beverly in Good Side of Bad. She's created a beautiful sort of lyrical, mystical short film. And I'm a producer on that and helping her make that as well.
So not that busy.
No.
Totally.
Super chill.
And I thought my plate was full. What's next for me is continuing to raise my 8-year-old who's almost 9, working at my restaurant, making sure it is as successful as it can be. And then I have another feature film that I'm producing and directing with 2 other filmmakers who I produced a different film with for When You Get Lost. And that new feature we're doing together is called Church and State. It's based on an off-Broadway play that when I went to go see it, I was like, this needs to be a movie so that everyone can see it because this is a limited run. So it's like a repeat idea from way back.
I was
in
going to
high
say, what a full
school.
circle moment.
It's a full circle moment. I'm like, everyone needs to see this play and I need to make it a movie because that's what I do now.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, it took us years and years and years to get the option, and now we're giving ourselves a year to get it off the ground, and that's very exciting. And then I have another movie that I'm attached to direct that was written by a fellow student who I went to Bennington College with. And I learned this lesson. He asked me to read the script just to like give him notes. And I was like, oh, okay. And I'm like, don't have time. I don't have time to read scripts. And then I was like, well, do you want me to direct this script? Because then I have time to read it. And he's like, oh my God, yes, you would be amazing. I'm like, all right, literally made time that very day. And it's a brilliant, funny script. It's called Mom 2.0. And that's in the works as well.
Also not very busy at all, clearly.
No. And she's going to produce on the shore. I mean, the shore. Horror film, the horror film that I'm making. So I'll get a little bit of Alethea magic on that film. Yeah, that's it. And I'll keep auditioning and booking roles and
It's gonna be so busy.
Living my best life, really.
I like how much you guys work together. I think that's really wonderful.
Yeah.
It's like a marriage, when you find a creative partner who you create good stuff with. So it's been good. And we're also kind of like jumping out of the nest.
So in closing, Good Side of Bad has already garnered critical acclaim, including awards at the Festival of Cinema in New York City and the Awareness Film Festival. How have you felt about the reception so far?
Awesome. Speaking of intentions, our first film went to the Awareness Festival and we won the audience award there.
And Best Actress and Best Actor.
Oh yeah, we won a lot of awards. That's right. But I wanted to win the Grand Jury Award and I wanted to win, selfishly, the Director Award. And so with this film at that festival, I didn't win Best Director, but at that festival, we did win the Grand Jury Award, and I was so thrilled and honored.
For those unaware of what that would mean, not myself,
I was going to say, Zeki, you're definitely not asking for you, right?
What does that award mean? Not just to you, but like in general as well, and maybe to you as for what that meant to get that.
It's like the Best Picture award.
Okay.
Yeah, it's basically the Best Picture that it's just the Best Picture award. Just like the Oscars, there's a team who votes, and then that's the jury, right? So the grand jury is the grand award that the jury voted on for the Best Picture. So it's pretty dope.
It's pretty dope.
That is
and
pretty
normally
amazing.
The grand jury is made up of professional filmmakers who I admire and respect. So then to have a group of professional filmmakers who I admire and respect then honor our film with that award is it's very gratifying. Like they're kind of the gatekeepers,
Well, yeah, it's just like the Oscars. It's like those are people in the Academy. They're industry professionals too.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like the Oscars, everybody.
They basically won an Oscar for the movie already. It's great.
That's right.
Basically. Before we wrap up, where can listeners watch Good Side of Bad, and where can they follow the two of you and keep up with all of the many projects that you have in the works?
Well, starting January 7th, people will be able to rent it. It's going to be on demand on Amazon, Apple TV, iTunes, Google Play, YouTube Movies, and certain cable and satellite, well, not certain, all cable and satellite on demand channels. Like we've covered all over all of our bases. And that's the first wave for our film, and we don't know exactly where it will land next, but for now it'll be on demand, and it's such an honor in today's very competitive independent film market to be on all these platforms. So yeah, we're on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, and Threads, and Blue Sky, Good Side of Bad Film. And then me personally, Jules Bruff. I'm under my name everywhere, Instagram. Well, not everywhere, but let's face it, I'm not really on TikTok. Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. And Alethea, where can they find you?
I have time for Instagram, and it goes right to Facebook. So those two places, it's just my name, Alethea Root. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Jules, Alethea, thank you both so much for joining us. It's been absolutely delightful getting to chat with you guys.
Oh, you guys are the absolute best and kind and smart, and it's just been a treat. And I feel very grateful to have been a guest on your podcast again.
The feeling
Yeah.
is very mutual.
Mhm.
Very, very much so.
Oh,
Yeah. Thank you for all your super insightful questions and allowing us to talk about all this stuff. It's rewarding. So thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you both on and getting to chat about you with these things. So
oh.
until next time, I'm Ben.
I'm Zeki,
And I'm Katie.
and this has been How the Fuck.
And why does it say all?
I don't know why it says all, but we are certainly not all saying it all at once.
That would never work.
The script
So,
has us all saying the last line together, and I don't know who put that in because that's not what we do.
It was definitely not me.
It's
But
like chaos night.
I guess we can say this has been How the Fuck.
Oh, God. You can edit that, right, Zeki? If you just retake it, the three of us can retake it.
We'll see what
Oh,
happens.
God. I was like, all together? I don't think so.
At the end of like all of the episodes, I sometimes will take some of like the more candid silliness that happens that doesn't make it into the episode, and then it gets at the very end, like even like after the outro music and after like if we have like a network,
It's like the Marvel
podcast
post-credit scene of our
yeah,
podcast.
I do like
I love
one of
it.
those like post-credit audio blips, and it's just usually gold.
That's the best stuff.